Have you ever noticed that two people can experience almost the exact same hardship and walk away with completely different futures? Two people go through divorce. One spends years believing they were rejected because they weren't enough. The other eventually sees it as redirection. Two people lose a job. One sees proof that life is unfair. The other sees an opportunity to build something new. Two people experience heartbreak. One closes their heart forever. The other learns from it and loves again. The event is often similar. The meaning becomes different, and sometimes that meaning shapes the next 10 years of a person's life. For a long time, I thought life was mostly about what happened to us. I thought the people who succeeded simply had better circumstances, better opportunities, better luck, better timing. But the older I get, the more I notice something fascinating. The same idea keeps appearing everywhere: in psychology, in faith, in the Bible, in the Quran, even in the teachings of people like Neville Goddard. Different language, different explanations, yet they all seem to point toward a similar truth. The beliefs we repeatedly hold become the lens through which we experience life, not because our thoughts magically control reality, but because our beliefs influence our expectations. Our expectations influence our behavior, and our behavior influences our future. Psychologists have studied this for decades. One of the most well-known examples is something called a self-fulfilling prophecy. If someone believes they will fail, they often begin acting as if failure is already inevitable. They hesitate. They avoid risks. They second-guess themselves. They stop trying. And eventually the outcome seems to confirm the belief. Not because the belief was true, because the belief changed the behavior. The same thing happens in relationships. Someone who believes they are unlovable often enters relationships differently than someone who believes they are worthy of love. Someone who expects abandonment notices every sign of distance. Someone who expects betrayal becomes hypervigilant. Someone who believes they are not enough often accepts treatment they would never encourage someone else to accept. The belief quietly shapes the experience. Then there is the placebo effect, one of the most fascinating discoveries in modern science. A person receives a treatment with no active medication, yet measurable improvements still occur because they genuinely believe healing is possible. Think about that for a moment. Belief influences experience. Expectation influences outcomes. Science acknowledges that what happens in the mind can affect what happens in the body. Again, not because belief controls everything, but because belief matters far more than many of us realize. This became deeply personal for me when I began looking honestly at my own life. After my first divorce, I thought I had healed. I thought surviving it meant I had moved on. I thought the chapter was closed. But something was still following me. Not the marriage, not the person, a belief. I was the first person in my family to get divorced. Nobody told me I was damaged. Nobody looked at me differently. But deep down, I quietly looked at myself differently. I felt blemished. I felt like something about me had changed, like I had somehow failed. I never would have admitted that back then. In fact, I wasn't fully aware I felt that way. But our deepest beliefs are often the ones we don't consciously notice. They live beneath the surface, and from there, they influence our decisions. Looking back, I can see that I carried some of those beliefs into my second marriage. Not intentionally, not consciously, but they were there. Part of me was still trying to prove something, trying to prove I was worthy, trying to prove I was lovable, trying to prove that the first divorce hadn't defined me. And when you're carrying those beliefs, they affect what you tolerate. They affect what you overlook. They affect what you accept. This is one of the reasons I became interested in the law of assumption. Whether you agree with all of Neville Goddard's teachings or not, one idea stood out to me. People often live according to the assumptions they hold about themselves. If someone assumes they are unlucky, they notice evidence of bad luck everywhere. If someone assumes they always choose the wrong people, they carry that expectation into every new relationship. If someone assumes life is constantly working against them, they begin collecting proof. Psychology calls part of this confirmation bias. We naturally notice evidence that supports what we already believe. Think about how powerful that is. Two people can look at the same situation and see completely different things. One sees obstacles, the other sees opportunities. One sees rejection, the other sees redirection. One sees proof of failure, the other sees a lesson. The circumstance may be identical. The interpretation creates a completely different experience. This is why I think people sometimes misunderstand the idea of frequency or energy. When people hear those words, they often imagine something mystical. But let's simplify it. Imagine walking into a room believing you are not enough, believing everyone will eventually leave, believing rejection is waiting around every corner. You will carry yourself differently, speak differently, interpret situations differently. Now imagine walking into that same room believing that your worth comes from God, believing that what is meant for you cannot miss you, believing that your value is not determined by another person's opinion. You carry yourself differently. The room hasn't changed. You have. And because you've changed, your experience changes. One of the things I love most about faith is how often it calls us back to this idea. Trust, not certainty, trust. In Islam, there is a beautiful concept called husn al-dhan billah, having a good opinion of God, trusting His wisdom, trusting His mercy, trusting that even when we cannot see the full picture, He can. There is a famous hadith Qudsi where God says, "I am as my servant thinks of me." Think about how profound that is. What do you expect from God? Do you expect mercy? Do you expect guidance? Do you expect goodness after hardship? Or do you expect that life is working against you? Because those expectations influence how you move through life. And interestingly, we find a similar principle in the Bible. Proverbs says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." Different scripture, a remarkably similar observation. What repeatedly lives inside eventually influences what appears outside, again and again, whether through scripture, psychology, or personal experience. A similar lesson emerges. Attention matters. Belief matters. Expectation matters. Not because they control reality, because they influence how we participate in reality. There was a period in my life when I had become so accustomed to disappointment that I was expecting it before it arrived. I thought I was protecting myself. I thought I was being realistic. But what I was really doing was allowing yesterday to write tomorrow. I was carrying old experiences into new chapters, expecting the future to resemble the past. Eventually, I realized something. The future deserves better than being judged by yesterday. That doesn't mean ignoring pain. It doesn't mean pretending difficult things never happened. It means refusing to let old chapters become permanent identities. Refusing to let past disappointments become future predictions. Refusing to let fear decide what is possible. Because what if there is still good ahead? What if there are blessings you haven't seen yet? What if the chapter you're in is preparation rather than punishment? This is where gratitude becomes so powerful, not because grateful people never struggle, but because gratitude changes where attention goes. It reminds us that what is wrong is not the entire story. It reminds us that hardship and opportunity can coexist. It reminds us that uncertainty and possibility can coexist. It reminds us that even in difficult seasons, there is still something worth noticing, something worth appreciating, something worth trusting. So if there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's this. Pay attention to the beliefs you carry, especially the ones you've never questioned, the ones hiding beneath your fears, the ones quietly shaping your expectations. Because what you repeatedly believe influences what you repeatedly expect. What you repeatedly expect influences how you behave, and how you behave influences the future you create. Trust God, carry good intentions, do your best, stay grateful, and remember that your future is not being built by your past. It's being built by what you choose to believe, expect, and do today. I'll see you in the next video.